So, I've seen a lot of people learning Rust lately. You might have even seen me learning it on Prime's show. I don't like or get the nature of when you define types.
Okay, no, parse is going to be required. Okay, it's because it's going to need to call. It needs to know what underlying function to call.
Yeah,
right.
Dot sort, then dot collect.
Nope. You can't. You only if you have an extra crate can you do a sort on an iterator stream. I'm surprised at how long that takes because that is instantaneous on my Lemur Pro.
Now it's being faster.
I know, but still, even in your editor, that's taking way too long. So I agree. The feedback loop that you just did, where you actually changed it and it didn't tell you that moment, was very, very surprising.
It's not my thing. I think it's an important language, and I'm super hyped to see the success it's been having and the performance it enables. But it is a worse developer experience than the stuff that we talk about here mostly, TypeScript. Learning Rust has actually given me a bit more of an appreciation for Golang and how simple it is to write code that has crazy performance. There is a role for Rust, but I think we're learning it without understanding that role or having the right reasons. I want to talk a little bit about that today. So, why should someone learn Rust? I think this might need a diagram. Things that make Rust great. It's important to understand there are a lot of these. First and foremost, performance. The performance in Rust is nuts. It is very specifically with memory because of the quality of the borrow checker and the push to keep things in memory only when they're used and not pull them out until they're not. The performance I see people getting in Rust apps is absolutely nuts. The safety and reliability are also really important. I do love the name itself, Rust. The goal of Rust is to write code that can sit there and run reliably for decades and still work on another computer with an entirely different architecture in decades because of the consistency and reliability of the language and the compile targets. Rust is meant to write code that is maintainable for a long time and also can run for a long time. And as a result, Rust is very scalable, both in runtime and in architecture, specifically like team code base size. So your app can get huge and still run well and have a lot of people contributing to it. And the code itself, as long as you're not telling Rust's rules to be, or as long as you're not ignoring all Rust's rules and honoring the compiler and borrow checker, your code can run super reliably for long sessions too. Let's also talk about things that make JavaScript bad. The things that make JavaScript bad are performance, safety. Is reliability really a problem in JavaScript? Memory leaks, runtime slowness, not very scalable. Big code bases are like whack-a-mole. Might notice something here. There's a lot of overlap between the things that make Rust great and the things that JavaScript is bad at, which makes it seem like an obvious choice. However, a lot of these things have been addressed in the recent years. Performance, V8 is killing it. Yeah, like performance in JavaScript has been consistently getting better year over year. The hard work that the V8 team has put into improving JavaScript has resulted in insane performance. It's still not going to beat native, but if you're willing to let your memory go all over the place, you can make JavaScript run really fast. Safety, obviously, TypeScript has helped us a ton here. It's not memory safety, but it is runtime safety, and it makes your code much less likely to break in runtime because of something you weren't expecting. Somebody else also mentioned bun. Good points. Memory leaks and runtime slowness. Do you know what helps with these? Lambda. Serverless. The fun of serverless is if you have a memory leak, it doesn't matter because the instance dies and gets remade. You don't have to worry if your runtime is temporary and you're not maintaining a very long process, which also, funny enough, serverless helps here too. And the big code bases are being solved more and more every day with things like ESBuild, Turbo, Pack, Turbo Repo, NX, so much more. There's a lot of work going into making big code bases a better experience in JavaScript. What's cool here is that all of these efforts are by different groups of people. V8 is all work being done by the Chrome team. Bun is being done by Jared Sumner and his new crew. TypeScript is by Microsoft. Lambda's by AWS. And obviously Vercel's putting effort in here. Still that there. Then ES Build is by Evan Wallace, the original CTO of Figma. TurboBack and Turbo Repo started by Jared Palmer, who then got acquired by Vercel as there to be part of that. Then NX is his own separate company too. All of these efforts are being done by different groups of people to continue improving JavaScript. It will never perform as well as Rust. But this is why we have to talk about less great Rust stuff. Hey y'all, I'm in the middle of editing this Rust video, and I just realized I didn't ask you guys to sub. I know it's silly to throw something like this in the video. When I make one of these callouts, it like triples the number of people who subscribe, and less than half of y'all have hit the button. So take a look quick, make sure the button's not white and doesn't say subscribe, because if it does, you haven't clicked it yet. Please do. It helps the channel out a ton. Anyways, back to complaining about Rust. Because this is some of the stuff that honestly surprised me. DX in Common Tools is not great. Specifically, my VS Code experience was really rough. Top of that, learning curve is steep. A deep understanding of memory is kind of necessary. Like suddenly pointers and all that stuff starts to matter again. It generally more code to write per feature, and developers who are experienced in Rust are more expensive. Generally speaking, when I write Rust, I feel like I have to think significantly more. And that is fine. If the thing you enjoy about coding is overthinking every line and making your code as efficient and safe and quality as possible, do it. It's fun. The problem with this is, what happens if the feature you made in Rust is a bad feature? Not because the code is bad. The code can be incredible, and it often will be. But the actual thing we built with that code ends up being bad. Then the developers who built on Rust are much less willing to throw that thing away. The problem with each line of code being more expensive isn't just that it costs more to make the code, because theoretically, if I'm a good enough developer, I can go just as fast in Rust as you can in JavaScript. It still was more work to do it, fundamentally, and no Rust developer is going to disagree with that. It is more work to build in Rust than it is to build in TypeScript. But if you have things that these solutions don't solve, like you have a JavaScript app that needs sockets. It needs to be long running. And JavaScript's just giving you problem after problem. Cool. Move over to Rust. Make a long living runtime in Rust, and you'll have a much better time for that. Golang will also give you the opportunity to do that with some of these pain points not being as strong, but it also is just a terrible language. So good luck, have fun. The problems with JavaScript are solved by Rust, but at great compromise. You will be slower as a developer moving to Rust. Your code will run faster. Oh, actually, one more thing I forgot to include here. Compile times suck hard. There are Rust apps that take hours to compile because of Rust's compiler being so deep and complex. The actual checks are very, very slow and painful. If you need all of that because your goal is code that will run for years, do it. But generally speaking, I think that there's a spectrum of how often is this run, and then like how often does this change. And generally speaking, there's a slope like this. It's actually more like this, of how often code runs versus how often it actually changes. Where when you first write code, you're going to be changing the shit out of that code all of the time. But as things stabilize and you get more customers, this curve starts to happen. And there are points on this line where different languages make more and less sense. I'd say above this line, TS, TypeScript type stuff makes a lot of sense. Below this line, Golang is a pretty solid option. And then you hit a point where your code is running a lot and it's not changing anymore, or as often anymore. And at that point, something like Rust really starts to make sense. But until you've hit an inflection point of your code isn't changing that much, and it is running a whole lot, and you're having problems where your infra costs too much money, or your like code keeps crashing in production, and you need a long-running runtime, or you have a specific problem with TypeScript that leads Golang and Rust, or leads you to Golang and Rust because they solve problems that you have with TypeScript. Do that. But generally speaking, and I really hope no one's going to argue at this point, the TypeScript developer experience is the best developer experience right now. They did it. It's incredible how good of an experience you can have building applications in TypeScript. But when you hit these problems, if the solutions that allow you to stay within TypeScript don't make sense, that is a great time to leave. And all of the skills you've learned writing with TypeScript will still help you onboard in other languages faster. You shouldn't feel like you have to learn every language because everyone's talking about it. And most importantly, this idea that the future is Rust and we're all going to move all of our TypeScript stuff to Rust is just not reality. It isn't. Right now, Rust isn't even faster in the browser than JavaScript and TypeScript. It is close, which is crazy, but you're compromising your developer experience significantly by using it. That part isn't going to change. By design, Rust is harder to write, and that is a good thing. We should not be upset with Rust for any of these things, and we should not be upset with people who like Rust for these reasons. But if you don't have these problems, the only reason to learn and adopt Rust is for fun. That is the core point here, and I hope y'all are understanding of that. Rust is a great language, Golang's a language, and TypeScript is a great developer experience. If you want to compromise that developer experience, it's best to do that with a reason. And what Rust has achieved is an incredible developer experience considering the platforms they're targeting and the performance targets they're aiming for. But you have to be conscious of those compromises when you make them, and you should make them with good reason. I hope this is helpful for you in picking your next stack and identifying what tech does and doesn't make sense for you to work on and adopt in your projects. And I hope that you maybe consider using TypeScript a little bit longer than you might have before. It's a great experience. You'll learn a lot from it, and you can still learn any of these other languages at any point. I did a lot of time in Golang and a lot of time in Elixir, and here I am now, all the way in TypeScript. I really appreciate y'all for watching this one. YouTube thinks you'll like this video as well, so give that a look. Thank you again for taking the time.